Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. We are thrilled to be presenting a 7-part series with our fantastic partner, Maze Row Wine Merchant. We are proud to present this series of interviews, diving deep into the heritage and legacy of Maze Row's excellent Italian producers. Tune in every Saturday from March 5th through to April 16th. As we take an intimate look at these respected historic producers and their role as part of the Maze Row family of luxury wines. And remember to check out our YouTube channel, Mama Jumbo Shrimp, for incredible video content featuring a visit to Argiano.
Good morning, everyone, or evening for those of you in Italy. Buonasera, Marilisa.
Buonasera.
Well, I'm Sarah Bray. I'm returning this week for this fantastic interview. I'm a wine writer and educator based in the Napa Valley. And today I'll be talking with this incredible woman in wine, Marilisa Allegrini, CEO of her family's company, Allegrini. We will be talking about the Valpolicella region in the northeastern part of Italy, outside of Verona, the wines produced there, such as Amarone, and specifically about her family's contributions to the region's quality renaissance over the last 40 years. So it's going to be very exciting. Then we are going to move into a discussion of Poggio al Tesoro, the family's next project out on the Bolgheri coast. And we are going to taste some delicious wines together as we do so. And then finally, today coincides with the launch of Maze Row Wine Merchants in the U.S., previously known as Lux Wines. Allegrini was actually the first winery to join this arm of Gallo, and it's one that celebrates the values of excellence, family, legacy, and sincerity. So it's really apt that we begin this new chapter talking with Marilisa. So with that, benvenuta di nuovo.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here with you and to present the Allegrini family history to wine lovers and connoisseurs.
Well, you've been doing that for a long time, and we will get into that. But let's begin with a little history. I know your family has been in the Valpolicella region for a long time. So can you give us a little bit of that history? When was it that Allegrini started? How long have you been working in wine?
So the history of my family in grape growing dates back 6 generations. And there is an official year of the company foundation, which is 1854. But historical documents witness that grape growing that dates back even earlier than the 15th century. Originally, mine was a typical rural and patriarchal family. But then in the 50s, my father expanded the winery by buying new vineyards and increasing production with an eye to the export market. So it was really a kind of person that understood the importance of innovation and also that it was also important to internationalize the company. And when my father took over, the company was quite small, but the most important imprinting or impetus he gave was his shift toward quality, something that was not taken for granted in those years in Italy. In fact, quantity was more important than quality.
We're going to dive into all of the innovations because it really sounds like he was a tremendous man. But before we do that, I do want to talk a little bit about you first. Did you always know that you would be working with your family in wine?
No, it was not my first choice as a teenager. But you have to keep in mind the social environment at that time, and also that the agricultural sector was completely dominated by men at that time. And so I wanted to quit, not because I didn't like the family business, but because I wanted to leave the continuation of the company to my brothers, as they were already involved in the company. And at the end, the pressure that came from my father, because I worked for 5 years as a physical therapist in the hospital, but then the pressure that came from him, together with the feeling that my family legacy was something that I too wanted to continue, brought me back into the company. And this happened in 1981. I started in the administration sector, and because back then it was less common to travel the world. Plus, when I asked my dad, he always said no. And but also to work in the hospital, it was a fantastic experience for me, because I think that when you learn, when you work with people that suffer, you really have an intimate feeling that also help you in the business. My father unfortunately passed away 2 years later in 1983. So at least I had the opportunity to work with him for 2 years.
Too short a time, I know.
Yes, definitely.
Well, we'll talk about you and your brothers in that moment a little later on, but let's talk a little bit more about your father, because he really did so much to set the stage for everything you've done. And even though he said no, you became a globe-trotting CEO anyway.
Yes.
So can you tell me a bit more about sort of his love of Valpolicella and what he brought to viticulture and winemaking in the course of his too short lifetime?
So definitely my father was extremely proud to belong to Valpolicella, which at that time was not a very highly considered wine producing area in terms of quality. But he wanted to demonstrate the region's true potential and create a reputation for quality. And he was a visionary. He studied deeply the geology and the type of soil and the type of grapes in the area, and he compared this with other great wine regions around the world. He brought back innovations, first in the vineyard with things like higher density planting and also a different wine training method, like doubled guyot instead of the traditional pergola. The pergola was heavily planted in Valpolicella, but the pergola facilitate heavy crop. He discovered, for example, that guyot training system was very important to control the vigorosity of Corvina and Corvinone, the two most important grape variety in Valpolicella. And then he, studying this grape variety with this very high yield, he understood the concept of yield per vine instead of just yield per hectare. And it was very clear to him that high yield means lower quality. He was very excited to start this new trend in Valpolicella, but he was criticized, sometimes even by people he respected. You could say that he was the sort of person who was prepared to think outside the box, to be experimental, to push boundaries in the search for better quality and innovation.
Well, we take so much of what you just described for granted now, but like you said, back in that time, it was a quantity versus quality argument, and, you know, the yield having to produce lots of wine. So I can imagine that the criticism came, but because they didn't understand what he was trying to achieve. And that has to have been stressful, because with vineyards, it all takes so long to actually see whether you're right or not.
Yes, at least 20 years. And this is the big challenge when you deal with new vineyards and when you introduce this kind of innovation. But I think that my feeling is that if you don't have the courage to innovate, it means that things will never change.
Well, that's a good mentality. It probably has taken you far. But let's talk a minute about some of this concept of the vineyards and these experiments. When and where did he actually start with these experiments and the changing of the training system? Are there particular vineyards that you're still working with where you really have seen the fruits of these results over the years?
Yes, I want to make this introduction. Being a winery that have this very long history, Allegrini owns some of the best single vineyard in the Valpolicella Classico area, all located up on the hillside. And in 1979, my father purchased what he called his lifetime dream. With the acquisition of two vineyards, La Grola and La Poia, he started its experiment in terms of viticulture. This La Grola is a hill and La Poia is a plateau located in the top of the hill and overlooking Lake Garda toward the west, the mountain to the north, and the alluvial plain facing south. So he found, with this focus on quality, he found these two vineyards, the best place to take over the experiments that he was doing with the Corvina and the Corvinone grape. And he gave new impetus to wine growing and made an immense contribution to the rebirth of viticulture and winemaker in Valpolicella. It was probably qualitative revolution, not only for his company, but for the entire Valpolicella.
It's pretty tremendous, but it's quite sad that he did not get to see the fruits of all of that labor. He passed away so shortly after 1979. So really this revolution was carried on by you and your brothers. Can you talk about those early years and the difficulties of that transition?
Oh, we were young when he passed away. I had just joined the company 2 years before. And of course, my dad was still in charge of everything, and his knowledge and understanding across all sectors of the company was enormous. So, under his control, we looked after separate areas. Walter managing the vineyard, Franco running the winery and winemaking operation, and I took care of the administration. But we were young, and it was much easier to work under his responsibility. So it was a big challenge for us to demonstrate that we were able to carry on what he did, trying to be as successful as he was. So after he passed away, we had to learn together how to go on. And we had to believe in ourselves and accept to learn from our mistakes as we went along. And also to learn about each other areas of expertise. And that was especially true for me. And at the beginning, it was a big challenge, as I said, first because we were not used to manage the company. But then we became aware that it was important to have the same mission, even if sometimes our vision for the future were different because of our different personalities.
I can't imagine. And, I love my brother, but I don't know how well we'd work together. So I imagine even just the interpersonal sibling relationships could be a little challenging too.
Yes, you can imagine myself growing up with two strong boys made me aware that I had to find against gender prejudice. It was a give and take relationship, but it made me stronger. And I discovered my real passion in the company, which was I was so safe when them were taking care of the production that I decided to start traveling the world, becoming the ambassador of the family. And this, the relationship worked very, very well.
Well, and knowing that people you trust and share your vision and your mission are taking care of the product at home means you can travel and go build the brand in the market, like you were saying. So were there areas that you were focused on in those early years? Were you coming a lot to America, for example?
Yes, I learned a lot from the United States because I learned the first thing was that the wine world was not just Valpolicella or not just Italy, but the entire world could produce great wine. And so I learned to taste different wines from my area. And also I learned how to communicate. I learned many, many things. So I'm really thankful to America and to the American people in the wine industry.
Well, and it sounds like those tastings and that exposure really helped you start to think differently about the wine that your region was making and allowed you to begin to build differently on your father's legacy. So can you talk me through some of the innovations that Allegrini has made? Specifically, maybe we can begin with Amarone and the production of that famous wine.
Yes, I explained before the innovation that we introduced in the vineyard management, but I think that one of the really big innovation happened in the Amarone field. And we have to look a little bit at the history of Amarone. Amarone in the past used to be a wine quite unknown. A very small group of wine lovers really know Amarone and really like the wine. And I think that it was because Amarone in the past used to have a different personality from the one that it has now. It was heavy, opulent, sometimes a bit sweet in the aftertaste. But the most important feature was the oxidative, heavy character on the nose and on the palate. This, what I like to call port-like flavor, was the most important characteristic of Amarone. And of course, this type of wine can be poured at the end of a meal. It would be difficult to find a food that could match well with these organoleptic characteristics. My father first understood Amarone could do more, could be better. He planted the seeds of the idea that we could make an Amarone that was more food friendly while at the same time maintaining its personality. And when Franco took over the winemaking process, he realized that it was botrytis or noble rot that could occur during the drying process that gave to the wine that touch of oxidation. And so he started experimenting how to prevent it.
Before we go into his experiments, let's just pause quickly because, like you said, not everyone knows exactly how Amarone is made. So can you just describe briefly kind of the traditional winemaking process, and then we can go into what the changes are that Franco kind of pioneered?
Yes, it's a very interesting and unique process, and that belonged to Valpolicella for thousands of years, the appassimento or drying process. It was known at the Roman time, but originally it was invented to produce a sweet wine, the Recioto. The Amarone is a very, very recent discovery. It happened only in the 50s. So how can we manage the production of Amarone? In September, when the grapes are ripened, we go in the field. We select the best bunches, and we have to select by law, by the DOC regulation, a maximum of 50% of the grapes in the vineyard. And then we have to take away any single damaged berry, even if it is dry or gray, we have to take away. And then we put the grapes into small boxes, and in these boxes we put only one layer of grape, and then we put the boxes on pallet, and we take the pallet to the drying facility. And this is a covered area provided with windows and doors, so we can open the windows and doors when outside there is very good ventilation, or close when there is humidity outside. And the grapes stay in this place for 90, 100, a maximum of 110 days. And during this period, they become like resin. So the water evaporates, and at least 40% of the liquid inside the water evaporate. But this is the most evident thing that happened to the berry, because what happened is that instead there is an intense metabolic change, and this is reflected into the final wine. So the end result is a wine higher in alcohol because of the evaporation of the water inside the berry, but very rich in body, in structure, and also rich in alcohol because the sugar content when we press the grapes for Amarone is quite high. So this is the process. It's unique because from dried grapes we produce dry wine.
No, it is quite a unique wine in the world of wine. But it does sound like there could have things go wrong if you have fresh fruit drying on a rack for about 90 days. So could we talk a little bit about that moment in the winemaking process and how Allegrini has really pushed forward some changes and innovations there?
You are perfectly right. There are some events that can happen during the drying stage that in the past, because of this undesirable event, we were not able to make Amarone every year. And this is due to the humidity that we can experience in fall or in winter. Remember that we are the 45th parallel in the north part of Italy, so it's an area where there is a lot of rain, and also because of the proximity to the lake, there is a lot of humidity. So what we understood was that the humidity was the factor that brought the mold or the botrytis to the grapes during the drying stage. And in 1985, after we discovered this, Franco started to experiment how to prevent the botrytis during the drying stage. So at the beginning, we experimented in our drying facility. But then in 1998, the method developed in a much better way. And we built this facility that is called Terre di Fumane. It's a state-of-the-art drying facility where the grapes are carefully monitored and controlled during the 4 months period of drying. And we circulate the air. This is the only technology that we use, believe it or not. But this circulation of air and keeping the right humidity help to keep the grapes healthy. And by doing this, we know that we can arrive at the end of the drying process with perfectly healthy grapes. And by doing so, we prevent the botrytis, and the result is what we were looking for.
So it sounds like for you, the vintage doesn't end when you pick, because humidity can change from year to year as well, right?
Yes, humidity can change a lot from one vintage to another. Of course, the grape growing period must be great in order to have great grapes. But the final part, so the drying process, is something that we can manage. And we age the wine from 90 to 110 days, depending on the humidity. And just to give you an example, if we have 60% humidity outside, we can dry the grapes in a shorter period of time than if it is 70%. And the two last vintages, 2020, we press late December, and 2021, where the fall was a little bit more humid, 15 days later. So this variation depends on the vintage.
So interesting. So are you the only ones that are using this Terre di Fumane facility?
No, because when we built the facility, my brother gathered other farmers and producers to share the experience. And because it was his idea, he runs the company as a CEO, but Allegrini being the largest shareholder. And all the other participants have shared based on the space they need. So there are a few other wineries, but there are several grape growers that do not transform the grape into wine, but they sell their grapes.
That's really incredible, not just from a technical perspective, which there was a lot of research that went into building that facility. And I think you have a second one now, right? That you built later on?
The process helped so much for the quality of Amarone that in 2018 there was one dismissed warehouse here in Fumane, in the same village where Allegrini is located. And so we purchased this new one, and we restored to be a drying facility. And now we have great potential to control a good amount of grapes, because in total we can control the production of 6 million bottles. Of course, not only Allegrini, but with the other producer, and also is a potential production. So we have the possibility to grow. But what I want to focus is the fact that the method, the drying process, is still carried out in a very artisanal way. technology helps, but it doesn't create force unnatural condition. So this is our mantra. We always want to have a very craftsmanship way to manage the drying facility.
But the impact of that, 6 million bottles of wine is huge. And yes, I understand they're not Allegrini wines, but that's an impact on an entire region with that quantity. So it really sounds like you are looking to raise the quality of all the wines coming out of Valpolicella and not just your own.
Yes, I think that there is a quote, rising tides will raise all boats. And this is true also for the Amarone. We are very proud to be considered the pioneer in this project. And now many other producers in Valpolicella follow this method. And I think that in general, Amarone has become a different wines from 20 years ago. And in fact, also the worldwide success of Amarone demonstrate this. Amarone not longer show its original oxidized character, but is a wine that is perfect to match with food and to enjoy with a wide, many different dishes.
This is probably a good moment for us to taste our first wine together, the 2017 Amarone della Valpolicella Classico. So I poured my glass about 45 minutes ago and have been just smelling it this entire time that we've been talking, and it's been changing so much. But I'd love to hear you talk about this wine a little bit. What do you expect on the nose? What does it deliver for you?
And this, Sarah, to open the bottle first or to put the wine in the glass is always a big idea, because through the tasting and waiting 5 minutes, you discover the nuances that comes out from Amarone. So on the nose, you can smell the resin, of course. You don't sense excess of alcohol, because the wine is power, but at the same time, with great balance. So this structure that the wine have do not allow the alcohol just to express itself. You can smell menthol, plums that come from the raisin grape, and then great aromatic intensity of dark fruit. And on the nose, I'm sure that you don't feel this, the oxidation that I was describing.
No, not at all.
No. And then in the mouth, the wine, it has a powerful impact on the palate, and with the mouthfeel gaining finesse and elegance because of the good acidity that the wine have. Remember that another important thing for the balance is the acidity, because normally if you over-ripen the grapes, acidity tend to drop.
Right.
But when we go through the drying process, all the elements concentrate, including the acidity. So the acidity is what is give the structure and the longevity of the Amarone.
Surprising, because Amarone is a higher alcohol wine. This wine is 16%, but there's a freshness and it finishes so dry and bright. Really I can only imagine what I want to be eating with this wine.
Another thing that you can feel in the aftertaste is softness without residual sugar. This was another thing of the Amarone of the past, the very high residual sugar. But very high residual sugar show opulence sometime in a wine that doesn't have the real structure. Here we don't have residual sugar, but we have the structure.
And it doesn't feel very heavy. I don't get a lot of oak spice. Can you talk a little bit also about how you finished this wine in the cellar?
So in January, we press the grapes. The fermentation goes a long time, goes on for a long time, at least 40 days. Then when we finish the first alcoholic fermentation, the wine has achieved 10% alcohol, is the moment then we separate the wine from the juice from the skin, because it's not yet a wine. It has to develop 5 more degrees alcohol. So at this point, when we separate the juice from the skin, we put immediately the wine into oak. We use 500-liter oak barrels. We choose soft to medium toast barrels, as we don't want the wine to taste oak. We want the expression of the aromatic expression of the grapes, so the resin. And we want to have a very, very soft oak touch, because then we have to leave the wine in barrel for 18-20 months. And during this period, all the sugar are transformed into alcohol with this very, very soft process where the wine develop one of the most noble alcohol, which is the glycerin. And it is the glycerin that gives this softness at the end. 18-20 months, 500-liter oak barrels, and part of the fermentation takes place in the barrel.
Well, it's, I think a lot of people think Amarone, big wine, quite heavy, but the freshness against all of that body is really quite remarkable. And I know that making wines that are food friendly is really quite important to your family. We talked about moving the Amarone from the end of the meal to during it. So I would love to know what some of your favorite dishes are to drink with this wine, whether from Valpolicella or things you've had around the world.
Okay, so I love to cook, and sometime during the year I cook what is my signature dish, duck à l'orange. And I think that this is the perfect combination for Amarone. But it's long. You have to spend one day in the kitchen if you want to make a duck à l'orange. So if you are really, if you want to trust this dish, I suggest. But otherwise, you can enjoy Amarone with any kind of duck, of poultry, or any kind of red meat, either roasted slowly in the oven or grilled. And because the pairing with food is very versatile for Amarone, even with this very important wine, I discovered that it goes very well with some ethnic cuisine because of its aroma of raisin grape. And I'm referring especially to spicy or sweet and sour flavors. So, Japanese teppanyaki, Chinese duck, Indian and Thai food, as well as some savory or spicy Middle Eastern dish. And if you don't want to cook at all, Amarone is very good with dry aged cheese, especially Parmigiano.
Well, I'm coming to your house for duck à l'orange next time in the
Okay.
Valpolicella. That sounds delicious. Some of those other really exciting pairing ideas. I can really imagine that sweet and sour flavor profile going well with this wine. So thank you for those. I'd love to kind of move away from Valpolicella in a moment and talk about your other projects. But before we do, I want to return to just one other really important contribution that we touched on before, which is the idea of the single vineyard. We just tasted a traditional Amarone DOCG. It's blended from multiple sites, but you actually produce several wines from unique sites. We talked about La Grolla, La Poia earlier. So can you tell us about the wines that you're making from single vineyards and why they're important to Allegrini?
Yes, thanks to the beautiful vineyard that we own in Valpolicella, and some are very historical one. We started producing Palazzo della Torre, for example, in 1960s as at the beginning as a single vineyard Valpolicella. And then in late 70, it took only the name of the vineyard. So now we have the wine Palazzo della Torre, which is one of our single vineyard. Then the same era, we bottled the single vineyard Fieramonte, and now Amarone Fieramonte is our Riserva single vineyard. And then in 1979, my father planted both La Poia and La Grolla, and these were the first single vineyard in Valpolicella that were Guyot trained with a focus on varietal expression rather than on the appassimento technique. So we have now these 4 single vineyard with different personality that represent the quality of the grapes that we can cultivate and ripen in these different properties, where the exposure, the soil, everything differs. So we can have soil that is clay or a mix of clay and chalk or just chalk. And so we want to enhance the characteristic of the different microclimate.
Very interesting. And are all of these planted to the native grapes from your region?
Yes, we don't have anything else than Corvina, Corvinone, which are the 2 major grape variety that account for almost now 90% according to the recent change of the DOC rules. And then there is one mandatory grape that is Rondinella, and then we have another grape that is Oseleta, and then we have but a very small percentage of Sangiovese, which in small percentage has always been planted in Valpolicella. So we are really focused on the native in native grape variety, because we think that if you have great grape variety, why sourcing somewhere else when the grapes variety are suitable for this area for thousands of years? It means that they found the perfect terroir. And we manage now 220 hectares, and which is 550 acres almost. And only small part is still under pergola, but almost the entire estate is planted with the Guyot training system. And then we recently developed an important project in Lugana, the wine producing area situated on the southern shore of Lake Garda, with 50 hectares vineyard, 120 acres planted with Turbiana, another native grape variety from this part of the world, and small selection of Cortese.
Very fun for you to expand in your region. Well, it sounds like you've come back to your father's first innovation, which is making your grapes shine in the vineyard with good vineyard management and focusing on what makes Valpolicella so unique and great.
You know, when you had a great mentor, you always follow what you learn from him.
I'm sure you take those lessons with you, especially as you've expanded to new projects. So I know you're not just working in Valpolicella. So can you talk a little bit about what motivated you to expand to Bolgheri, where you have Poggia al Tesoro, and where you do work with some international varieties?
Well, when you go to Bolgheri, you understand why the first time I went there, I fell in love with the area.
It's very beautiful.
Because it's beautiful, because the landscape is really amazing, because even if you are close to the sea, it's not very much built. So along the coast there are some hotels and resort, of course, but in the countryside the landscape is really amazing. And in addition to this, we knew that Bolgheri was suitable for the production of excellent wine. It was the area where the Super Tuscan started, and together with my brother, Walter, it was really love at first sight. So we decided to start and in 2002. And by the way, we are celebrating this year the 20 years anniversary of Poggio al Tesoro.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. It seems for me yesterday, but when I look around and when I look behind with all the work that have been done, I feel very honored that I had the possibility to invest in this beautiful wine producing region, but also very proud of myself. Because unfortunately, Walter, 2 years later, passed away in 2003. So from 2003, from our first trip to Bolgheri, which was in 2001, the foundation of the company was in 2002. And I had to carry on also his legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to go on without fear because also there we had beautiful vineyard, very well positioned, some along the fabled Via Bolgherese.
Well, that's an incredible story of strength and resilience for a second time in your life.
Yes.
Do you have other members of your family involved there now?
Oh, I'm very happy because my two daughters, Carlotta and Caterina, Caterina is finishing her studies, but sooner or later they will both be part of the company. They are very excited and very dedicated to the to Poggio al Tesoro. Now, part of their time, but in the future, for 100% of their time. So, I'm looking forward, and this is the same thing that I received from my father, something that was important, but still at the beginning. So they will have the opportunity to develop with their attitude, with their personality, Poggio al Tesoro as they want.
Well, you set quite the example as a strong woman at the head of your family's company, and I'm sure they admire you greatly. I don't know, have you ever had any great adversity as a woman? Or, I mean, we think all the time, oh, well, Italy is such a male dominant country, but you've superseded so many challenges in your life.
Yeah. As I said earlier, I grew up fighting with, for myself, being in the middle of two strong brothers, and but my father never discriminate. So I think that I had self confidence even when I was totally unaware of the difficulty of the business part of my duty. And I think that is something that you have to feel inside, and you have to feel to be more self confidence. Women have a lot of power, a lot of strength, and a lot of capacity, and also can dedicate a big part of our life to work, because we really, when we have a vision, we follow all the difficulties without fear to arrive at the end of what we want.
I agree with you, and I'm sure your daughters do too, with you teaching them in all of the ways that you lead by example. I'd love to finish with the 2017 Sondraia that we both have before we open it up for any questions. Since this is your project, your wine, it's appropriate for you to kind of tell us the story of the project through the lens of this premium, lovely glass of wine we have in front of us. So what is in it?
So what you said before, that Bolgheri is famous for international grape variety that have adapted very well to the Bolgheri terroir. So I like to talk about the Bolgheri expression of the international grape variety. And in Sondraia, we have the three grape variety, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. 65% Cabernet Sauvignon, 25 Merlot, and 10% Cabernet Franc, vinified separately, and then blend and put into barriques where they age for 22 months in 70% new and 30% second year barriques. And Cabernet gives power to the wine, Merlot softness, and Cabernet Franc the spiciness. So we have the usual deep ruby color of Sondraia, an intense aromatic expression of red fruit, citrus note, hint of licorice, and what I like the most, and come from the area where the vineyards are planted, and is the personality of this wine, is the beautiful smell of Mediterranean scrub. When you go to close to the sea, and there is some bushes between the road and the sea, and there are in these bushes, you can smell exactly what you smell now in Sondraia. And
No,
then
it's
when
very apparent, those dried herbs, and it just smells like Tuscan sunshine.
sage, rosemary, this is what I feel in
Yeah.
Sondraia.
Well,
And in the mouth, with the first taste, all the components are very well balanced. The tannins are dense but also silky, and the palate is elegant and precise. And one thing that I like in Sondraia is the freshness, because being close to the sea is very easy to reach the sugar content, and so sometimes with this you can lose the freshness. But if you harvest at the right time and with the right climatic condition, you can keep this freshness. And we mostly harvest very early in the morning, sometime even at night time, because we want to bring the grapes to the winery for fermentation, for destemming, when they are still very fresh and they didn't reach the temperature that you can experience at noon.
well, that balance of both kind of richness and weight, but also freshness, I think, is a DNA that it shares with your Amarone. So must be a family trait for your wine.
Yes, is a family signature.
Well, with that, I'd love to ask anyone listening to hop in the room for any questions. Fabrizio, please.
Good afternoon or good evening. First of all, I didn't want to have the room sort of come to an end without thanking Marilisa for teaching me again about Amarone and its evolution. I speak as an experience of a person that learned about wines actually after moving to America from Italy and being exposed as a salesperson in a restaurant for it to all the wonders of the Italian wine making. And Amarone has always been one of my favorite, and I always search sort of those tones in any other wines that I try to experience, and it's good to know that it got an update and it's getting a little bit more popular. And so I want to thank you. Now it's going to be easier for me to sell it just to my friends. I don't work in wine anymore, so unfortunately, but it's going to be great to serve it again with all those recommendations, and I look forward to trying it. So it was just a thank you.
Thank you very much for your words, Fabrizio. Thank you. Am I happy that you appreciate Amarone?
I think the most important thing is just making sure that you share wines you love with people that you love. And so I think with that, that's maybe all the time we have. Marilisa, for me, this has been such a tremendous honor to get to talk to you today. And as we kind of prepared for today, it's been so great to get to know your story and just your wines in such a more intimate way.
Thank you, Sarah. And let me thank all the participants to this occasion. And also, I would like to thank very much Maze Row Wine Merchant, which is our importer in the United States. And it belongs to the Gallo family. And in the wine business, family is a very important issue, not only in Italy, but all over the world. And I must say that I love to work with them, because even if we are a small company and they are a large company, we share the same philosophy to be linked to our consumer, and try to make every year the best possible wine.
They're good ambassadors for you, I think. Well, thank you all. We will be continuing this series next week with Barbara Widmer of Brancaia, another world-class producer with an uncompromising devotion to her craft. So with that, I say thank you all. Grazie e a dopo. Ciao.
Grazie.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of our new Maze Row Wine Merchants series. The focus is on excellence, family, legacy, sincerity, and innovation. Tune in next Saturday for the next installment featuring another in-depth and intimate conversation with the heritage Italian wine producers that form the core of the Maze Row Italian wine family. To learn more about Maze Row Wine Merchant and today's featured producer, see our show notes and visit their websites. Don't forget to subscribe and like our show and tune in to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your pods.